Hello and welcome to this month's edition of United Way at Work. I'm your host, Nancy Gordon, Executive Director of United Way of Rutland County. And my guests here today are from Rutland Area Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice. Nicole Moran is the Director of Hospice and Palliative Care, and Beth Wilson is the Clinical Manager of RAVNAH's Home Care Team. It's hard to believe, and I know neither of you has been around for the entire history, but that RAVNAH is celebrating 70 years of service to this area this year. Congratulations on behalf of all of RAVNAH.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, RAVNAH covers such a wide spectrum of services, everything from cradle to grave, essentially. And I, in the interest of full disclosure, have been a beneficiary myself. I had a finger surgery 7 or 8 years ago, and I live alone. So guess what? When your hand is in a sling for 2 weeks, you need help with things like getting in and out of the shower, etc. So I was very grateful to be a short-term beneficiary of home health care services. So thank you for that. Let's talk about the advantages of home care. Obviously, we have a fine hospital, very dedicated staff. There are rehab facilities in the region, also with good reputations. But what makes home care advantageous?
So, people really do best in their own environment, and that is their home. Short of the birth of a child, there's really no good reason that people would actually enjoy going into a hospital. So when things happen to you for whatever reason, whether you've had an acute injury, you've had an illness that's flared up, and you want to go home and you want to stay home and you want to get better quicker, a good avenue for that to happen is through receiving home care services. And people find great value in that, just as you just mentioned. The short term was that you needed help for a few weeks. It's great to be able to receive that in the home. What would you have done, Nancy, if they'd have told you, now I want you to go to outpatient therapy 3 or 4 days a week when you can't drive because you only have one working hand? So there are circumstances under which people need help at home, and that's what the visiting nurses is all about.
You mentioned, fewer trips to the doctors by virtue of the fact that somebody's coming in, but I also imagine fewer trips to the emergency room, that something hasn't gone wrong because there's nobody monitoring somebody at home after a procedure. So that's a huge savings to the community as well as to the individual patient. What are some of the other services available besides the short-term person with a broken finger healing? What kinds of things are people doing in the home as opposed to other settings?
Well, from a home care perspective, we offer a broad range of services. There's the medical nursing component, we have behavioral health services, we have a wide variety of therapy from speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have some specialty programs under which people can also receive respiratory therapy if they're receiving a Breathe Easy program, which is something specific to people with chronic lung disease. We do chronic illness and disease management. We have medical social services for people that can help address needs. We do some telehealth monitoring, which is the ability to monitor your health remotely by using equipment that we install into your home. But we also have things that are outside of the home care spectrum. We have a large amount of pediatric services, both therapy and nursing based. We have community health and wellness services, so we go into the community, do blood pressure checks, foot clinics, cholesterol checks. We also have a service at the visiting nurses where we give immunizations if you're traveling abroad. And then we have private care services where if you have the need of a companion, if you have the need for homemaker services, that those things can be brought to you in your home setting.
All of which make such a tremendous difference as I listen to you in terms of quality of life. We talk all the time at United Way about community impact. The basic questions: what did you do, how well did you do it, and is anybody better off? And boy, do you have a lot of people who are better off because of RAVNAH services. I can't quote the chapter and verse right now, but just what you have described in terms of the impact on people's lives and the difference that it makes to be home, getting better sooner.
Right.
And some of the things that you've mentioned that I'm sure most people watching are not thinking in terms of RAVNAH, like speech therapy.
Yeah, you know, I think that when people think about the visiting nurses, they really zone in on the nursing piece of it because it's the visiting nurses. So I think the name is a little bit of a misnomer. We have multiple services, as you mentioned earlier, from birth to death. There's virtually no medical need that can't be met in your home as long as we have the appropriate equipment to do so. And we have requirements that we have to meet, which is our responsibility to ensure we meet those requirements. I'm well versed in the home care piece. Nicole is much more well versed in the palliative care and hospice piece of that.
Yes, and so in addition to all the services that Beth already spoke about, we also have our hospice program, which primarily provides care for patients in their home, but can also be done in assisted living facilities. And then we also have our palliative care program, which is for patients who are not quite ready for hospice, end-of-life care, but they are living with a terminal, life-limiting illness. So we provide supportive services and symptom management and within the home, just like home care nursing. And we also have a program called the Supportive Care Grant, which is specific for patients with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and congestive heart failure, and working with them to help them do some goal planning and really get them the resources that they need so that they can be successful for whatever time they have left. So my area is really more focused on the end of life piece and comfort and quality of life, as you said. So,
well, my late brother was a hospice beneficiary back in 1990, and I can tell you that that was a very powerful experience for him, and the personal comfort that came from that, that rippled through the family. And I happen to have a lot of friends who are or have been hospice volunteers, and it's always something I thought, if I get to retire, I'd like to do that, because I think it's invaluable to just be a companion to people through the end of life for somebody they love. You know, not only to the patient, but to the support system around the person dealing with their own issues around the impending loss. So I have nothing but the deepest respect and appreciation for palliative and hospice care, having witnessed it firsthand with the various family members and friends. A lot of the things that you've mentioned involve equipment. So if I'm a home health care or a palliative care patient, or a hospice patient for that matter, are you bringing things in and out of the house regularly? Is something on loan? How does somebody deal with the maintenance of equipment in a situation like this?
So it varies with the program. I'll speak to the hospice piece. Under the Medicare hospice benefit, which Medicaid very similarly mirrors, and as well as any private insurance, but any medical equipment that's required for a person to stay at home and meet their goals of care under hospice, it's all included in a bundled payment under their Medicare hospice benefit. So we arrange the ordering and facilitating the delivery of the equipment, but it's all paid for under that benefit. So, but it's different with the other services. So. Go ahead.
That it is. So from a home care perspective, a lot of it depends on what kind of equipment we're talking about. If I'm coming to your home and I'm dealing with a surgical wound where a dressing needs to be provided or changed on a regular basis, then we bring that equipment or those dressing supplies into your home. If you have an ostomy that requires care, we bring those supplies into your home. Now, if you're talking about large medical equipment, let's say you need a hospital bed or a walker or a bedside commode or something of that nature, then we coordinate with your physician to get that equipment provided to you by a local company, and hopefully, where it can be, covered under your insurance benefit to try to minimize what comes out of your pocket for those types of equipments. Some things are not covered by any insurance, so we have some various ways we can help get that taken care of for you.
That's a huge piece of this, and I know that RAVNAH, because of the comprehensive nature of its services, has to bring in funding from many sources besides United Way, which has been a partner for many years, but there's no way that an operation the size of RAVNAH would run on funding from any single source. So in terms of these situations, you have to serve, I imagine, as ombudsman a lot of times to help patients figure out the system and what benefits to which they are entitled and how to cover the expenses. Because I know oftentimes it costs you more to provide the service than you actually get back from a governmental source.
Well, no doubt. That's one of the reasons that social work is vital when providing services to patients, whether they're children, adults, in the middle of their lifespan, at the end of their lifespan. We have social work services that really work with patients to look at community resources, to look at various entitlements, to help them with paperwork for long-term Medicaid, for disability, for a lot of things that help people with that financial problem. I've been working with the visiting nurses since September of 2002. And to my knowledge, there has never been a patient who's been turned away based on a lack of ability to pay. As an example, in 2014, we gave away over $855,000 of unreimbursed services. Wow. So what do we do about that? Well, we look to funding from our community partners, like the United Way. We have donations, we have fundraisers. One of the things that really is pertinent to the current time we're in is when we all go to the polls. You know, most towns in the polls have something on their ballot saying, are you willing to donate X number of dollars to the visiting nurses? When you vote yes, that money goes into a pool and it pays for people in your community that need home care or hospice or palliative care services. And that money then pays for you or your neighbor to receive the services that you need.
And again, when we think about the money spent versus the level of funding that would be required for a full hospital stay, for example, or some of the other medical complications that might occur if people weren't getting consistent home care, the short-term expense pales in comparison with the long-term savings to the community, not to mention PS. Absolutely. It's the right thing to do for the people involved.
Well, absolutely. I think if you think about what it costs for a day in the hospital or a day in a skilled nursing facility, clearly the least expensive option is care that's provided to you in your home. Patients are happier. Families are happier because their family members are at home. You're going to get over the acute phase of an illness or an injury in a hospital setting, but you're not going to get well until you get home. So that's why that care after that inpatient stay, whether it's in a hospital setting or a facility that provides rehabilitative services, is vital. So you can get back to your life, graduate from the visiting nurses, and go on with your life as if this had not happened to you.
Imagining a cap and a hospital gown when you say graduating
Exactly.
visiting nurses. The availability of services, how do you fare in terms of weekends, holidays, various shifts? Obviously people imagine a Monday through Friday weekday business hours kind of schedule, but that can't possibly be the reality of what you do.
No, it's not. We are a 24/7 agency, so we have nurses, staff on call all day, every day to help in any time of emergency, particularly with hospice. I mean, our on-call team with that is very readily available for symptom management and then to respond when there is a death. But the same thing with home care. If there's an emergency, somebody has a dressing that falls off at 2 o'clock in the morning and I have a leaking wound, you know, there's somebody available via phone call to either talk somebody through it or go out and actually make a visit and to help that person, to prevent them from going to the hospital and, you know, keep them in their home. So
let's talk about some of the common qualities. I mean, you've both had a chance to observe excellence in coworkers, whether it's an RN or an LNA or a speech therapist or an occupational therapist or a home aide. What are the qualities that make for somebody who's really good in this setting?
Wow. Okay. So I guess the first thing that seems to be consistent across the board, whether you're talking about a nurse, an aide, a therapist, a social worker, is there's an innate responsibility on the part of that person to provide for someone else. I guess a good term for that would be altruistic. I want to do something for a larger good that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me, but I want to provide for someone else. And I see that in every avenue of the people that I work with at the visiting nurses. You know, it's really easy to say that of the clinical staff because they're out actually in the home making the visits, rendering the hands-on care. But without the people who are working in the office, none of that can go forward. So, you know, we have a host of people who work in our office that are clerical staff, accounting staff, that do their jobs so that I can go out and make visits and do my job. So it's all one big family. Our family taking care of your family, because if we didn't work collaboratively and if we didn't have a care for the greater good of the people in our community, none of us would be able to be successful.
All boats really do rise with the tide. That's a common theme for United Way, at least in my mind. And I really do think that whatever happens to the most vulnerable among us reflects on us all in terms of quality of life for the whole community.
If I can just add to that, I also think in addition to the altruistic mannerisms and personality traits, I think that, you know, just having a level of compassion, and that seems so basic to say, and you know, you obviously they have compassion, but to walk into somebody's home and to enter into their private environment and to be exposed to them fully, that's a privilege. And I think in order to be able to provide that care, you are a very special person to walk into an environment not knowing what you're going to see, not knowing what you're going to step on or smell or encounter, but you're there and you're focusing on that patient and that family. And that level of compassion is huge. And being a home care provider is like nothing else in healthcare, nothing else.
It's interesting that you talk about that because, again, with my situation, when I did briefly have that visiting nurse, I was so vulnerable. Very vulnerable, and she was so incredibly compassionate. It just oozed compassion, kindness, patience, tenderness, and like you say, to be in your own home in a very vulnerable state, you really need to feel that that person is on your side and accepting, fully accepting. And that is an incredible quality when somebody brings that gift to bear in this kind of work.
Well, we often kind of make an analogy when people come to a doctor's office or go to a hospital or a facility, people show them what they want you to see. And I do that. When I go to my doctor, I share with my physician what I want to share. But when people come into your home, you invite them into your lives. And I can't hide things when you come to my home. And it becomes painfully obvious after a few visits that there's some needs that have not been met that we kind of want to address and get you to a better place so you can stay in your home, maintain your health, and have the life that you'd like to have. It's hard to hide when I come to your house. You don't get to show me what you want me to see because it's there just to be seen. And that's very powerful. It's powerful for the individuals that make those home visits. And as Nicole said, you kind of invite us into your life, whether it's, you know, for a few weeks or a few months or more long term. And we take that very seriously. We are always visitors in your home. We do have a purpose and we have a reason for being there, but we still have to respect how you live and what your goals are and how you want to get from point A to point B. I often say we're passengers on the bus. You're the driver. You have to be.
Now, how many patients would a staff member typically see in a day? I had a landlady who was one of the visiting nurses, and I remember some days her days went rather long because she had to take extra time with a given person or two on a given day.
Well, from a home care perspective, and I know Nicole will speak to the palliative care and hospice, you know, most of the nurses that are registered nurses will see an average of 5 people in a day. And we try to have it done in a geographical sense, so you don't travel from Bombazine to Dorset, then over to Danby, because then you spent half your day traveling. So generally speaking, the registered nurses make 5 visits a day. The licensed practical nurses usually make 6. But, you know, you start your day out, you call your folks that you're going to go see, you give them a window of time. I think I'm going to be there between 12 and 1. Think you're going to be at somebody's house for an hour, walk into some real problems, you're there for 2.5 hours, because it takes the time it takes. That's one of the benefits to doing home care, is you have that control over your schedule. You know, you're able to call your next patient and say, you know, I'm really sorry, I've been unavoidably detained. I'm going to be there now or this time instead of the time that I had initially told you. Most patients don't have a problem with that, because they know if I come to your home and you've got a problem, I'm going to take care of it, whether that takes me 30 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes.
At the time, I'm your only patient in the world.
That's right. I'm not like I'm in a hospital or facility where I've got a whole floor full of people that I have to be responsible for.
Mm-hmm. And for the hospice and palliative care programs, it's a little different because we know that there are going to be circumstances that require some more time. So they average about 4 visits a day for the registered nurses, and our licensed practical nurse 5 or 6, depending. But take into consideration when we're doing an admission, that obviously takes a lot longer than just doing a regular visit. Mm-hmm. But we do account for more time with those hospice patients to allow for that symptom management and really teaching with the family, because that's a lot of what we do, is education for patients and for families, so that, you know, they know what signs and symptoms to expect. They know when they should call us. They know when they should call the doctor. Really empowering them with all of these tools. So with hospice in particular, that requires a little bit more time, because not many people are very comfortable or knowledgeable about the process of dying. So we account for that.
We live in a culture that still doesn't do a very good job with that conversation.
We do not.
Although I know RAVNAH has the Starting the Conversation program, and
Yes.
There's the Death Cafe movement and some other things that are signs that we're improving, but we still have a long ways to go. In terms of hospice volunteers, what kind of background, what skill set, what personal qualities should somebody have if they think they might want to do hospice work?
It's interesting that you asked that, because we actually have a training starting next week, next Thursday. We look for people who have any level of interest in hospice services, and you know, they come in from all different backgrounds and all different demographics, but with a common goal of wanting to provide assistance to a person in their family during that time of privilege, as I said before. It's a pretty intensive training process. It's I think it's 6 weeks long, but don't quote me on that. But it's a total of 24 hours of training, and it's classroom education. And then, you know, a lot of people go through that and realize, I'm not quite ready for this, or they go out and do their first visit and they're ready. I mean, it does take a special person. We take a lot into consideration. Our volunteer coordinator really focuses on matching people based on personality and interests, so that, you know, when you're going out as a volunteer to a patient's home, you have somewhat of a level of comfort in knowing what you're going to be doing.
Likely to fit in and maybe have something to talk about
Yeah,
with somebody.
yeah.
How many people would a hospice volunteer typically work with at a time?
It also varies. We have some that are very active and could see 2 or 3 people, you know, in a week, and we have some that are more sporadic and, you know, focus really on just one person and follow that person throughout their whole stay. It's pretty variable. We have some very active volunteers who are constantly picking up shifts and doing things. And then we have some that, you know, take some time off for personal reasons or whatever. But we have several different programs, and the volunteers serve many different purposes. You know, they can provide companionship, respite. We have a group called Trillium, which is a group of singers.
We've had them perform for United Way functions. They're absolutely wonderful.
They're great. We have Reiki volunteers who can go to the home. And I'm excited to say that soon we will have therapy dogs, so to be able to offer that service. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So a very wide variety. People bring in a lot of different skill sets. We have a new a brand new volunteer who actually was a judge. And so she is coming in with it, really focusing on getting people to do their advanced directives and working really closely with that to start the conversation. So, whatever your interest is, it could apply to just a certain area of hospice, and it could be beneficial for the patients and the community. So,
to find out more about that hospice training program, what would we do?
you can contact John Campbell, and just the main number, the 775-0568, and they can connect you with him. But he's our volunteer coordinator, so he would be able to get more details.
Yeah, that's an incredible program. Again, I know a few people who've been through it and worked as hospice volunteers, and it's so rewarding. Someday I hope to do it myself. I truly do.
I'll hold you to it.
Seriously. I think that's a particular calling that I might have. RAVNAH has gotten some really fine recognition in the last few years for its various services too. Tell me about that.
Well, we've been rather fortunate that our hard work has paid off. CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, started last year utilizing data from home care agencies across the country to give them star ratings. Anywhere from a half a star, which is relatively low, up to 5 stars, and in half-star increments. So how they determined how you would rank in a star system was they took data that we are required to collect when we bring you onto service, and then data that we're required to collect when we take you off of service, because as we said, you graduated, and they compare how did you get people better from the beginning of the services to the end of the services. So CMS took that data from all the home care agencies across the country, did some number crunching, which I'm not a mathematician and can't explain that part to you, and then came out with their star rating. So in 2015, there were 12,261 home health agencies in this country. Of those, 2,902 of those agencies received no rating. There's some quality markers that you have to meet in order to get a rating. However, of those, there were 5-star agencies. There's 239 in the country. So that's not a big number.
No.
There were 776 4.5 or 4.5-star agencies in the country. That's not a big number, but that's where RAVNAH fell. We were ranked as a 4.5-star agency. We're the only 4.5-star home care agency in the state of Vermont. And if you think about the statistics of 776 out of 12,261, that's pretty awesome.
So you're certainly in the top 1,000 of the 12,000 something in the country, and as you say, 4.5 stars. That's more than a solid rating. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. We work very hard to get that. Most agencies in the country rank in the 3 and a 3.5 star. Average is their showing. And they also had a 2nd-star rating, which they came up with the patient experience. How would patients give you a rating? And we were fortunate that we received a 4-star out of 5-star ratings for that. There's not any comparatives for the state and nation yet, because that just came out, so more to come on that in the future. But the agency as a whole, whether it's our pediatric services or our medical services and home care or hospice or palliative care, are always looking for ways to do a better job. Because if we succeed, then you as our patients also succeed.
Thank you so much, Beth Wilson and Nicole Moran from Rutland Area Visiting Nurse and Hospice Association. If you would like to support the work of RAVNAH through United Way, you may go to your mobile phone, text in the number 41444, and the message would be the word Rutland. You'll get the link to complete your donation from there, tax-deductible support for fine agencies such as RAVNAH. We very much appreciate you supporting RAVNAH and all of our partner agencies doing what we can to improve life for everybody in the community. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Nancy Gordon. Talk to you again next month.